Hello everyone, welcome to our forum. It's my great pleasure to introduce you our guest today, Dr. Lisa Haile. She is the partner of DLA Piper. I first met Lisa at a gene patent debate. It's a debate about whether human genes should be patented or not, and I was immediately impressed by her. You find out that she's not one of the person that you would want to argue with. So she's precise and to the point. So hi Lisa, welcome.
Thank you.
So it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Would you introduce yourself a little more? I know that you have double doctors. You have a PhD in Microbiology and Immunology, and also the JD, the Juris Doctor.
Right.
And let's start from there.
Okay. First of all, thank you for inviting me. So my background is probably similar to many of you. My undergraduate degree was in biology, and initially I thought I wanted to go to medical school. It's a more traditional path, and fell in love with the labs in my biology classes and biochemistry, and decided rather than going to medical school that I wanted to go into research. So after college, I ended up going to Georgetown University School of Medicine in their PhD program. The department was Microbiology and Immunology, but as I'm sure you're aware, that doesn't necessarily define what you end up studying. So my background is more cell biology and molecular biology. But the first couple of years of my PhD program was in the medical school, and so we took the traditional coursework with the medical students for 2 years, and then went on and did research. And so my research was on cell cycle control, basically looking at genes that were responsible for regulation of cell cycle control, and then looking for abnormal cell cycle control. So essentially, the makings of cancer cells. That was the area I did my PhD work on. I had identified some genes that were very early response genes in the cell cycle that had lost control and may have been a contributing factor to cancer. And ended up coming out here to California to do my postdoc at what was then La Jolla Cancer Research Foundation, and of course now is the Stanford Burnham Medical Research Institute. So I did my postdoc for almost 3 years, working on oncogenes, specifically the GM-CSF receptor, and sort of improved my skills in molecular biology, but at the same time realized as much as I loved the science and the medicine, being a bench scientist probably wasn't the direction that I wanted to go. And so I looked at the possibility of different careers combining the science with something else. My first priority was the science and the medicine. That's always been my first love. And through a lot of telephone calls and meetings with people and sort of research, I came to find that there was this combination where I could combine my science background with the law and specifically go into intellectual property and help research institutes and companies help protect their IP, and it seemed like a good combination to me. So that was the path that I took, and I went to law school, and I've been practicing now about 22 years in the area. Primarily it's intellectual property, but over the years I've become a little bit more of a sort of general transactional attorney for life science companies. So that's my background.
Good. Can you talk a little bit about your company right now?
Yeah, so when I first started, I worked at what then was sort of these traditional IP boutique firms, and so they really focused on intellectual property. All really patent attorneys have a technical background, and so they're either on the engineering side, most are either EEs or computer science, or they're on the science side, and they've got typically a PhD or at least a master's degree in one of the sciences. It's a little uncommon for someone just to have a bachelor's degree in biology and then go on and become a patent lawyer. So the firm I was with was very technically trained attorneys, both on the transactional side, which means obtaining patents, but also on the litigation side. Most of the litigators did not have advanced degrees. They are more trial attorneys who learn the technology for each particular case. And that wasn't the direction I wanted to go in. I preferred drafting patent applications and working with the scientists and the inventors. So I started at that IP boutique all the way through to becoming partner there. But I guess again, like my ultimate transition from science to the law, I knew even before I became partner that being at the IP boutique was not where I wanted to stay, that I wanted to sort of expand my understanding of the legal aspects of the biotech industry. And so I looked for a more general practice firm that could give me training on the corporate side and licenses and that sort of thing. And so after becoming partner at the initial firm, I moved to a firm here called Gray Carey Ware in Friedenreich, which was very well known at the time, but really didn't have an IP practice in this area. And so I helped develop their biotech and chemical IP practice. And then in 2005, we did a merger between 3 law firms. There was a firm called DLA in Europe. They didn't have any offices in the US. And then an East Coast firm called Piper, and then Gray Carey. So the 3 firms did a 3-way merger all at the same time, and we became this very large, all of a sudden, global law firm, and today we are the largest law firm in the world.
Right.
So we've got offices in just about every major market in the world that you can think of, and cover just about every practice area other than criminal law or divorce law.
Okay.
So that's where I am today.
Interesting. I know that the DLA Piper is the largest law firm, and I didn't know how it comes.
Yeah. So it's 8 years, going on 9 years now, and of course, in the first 2 to 3 years, a lot of people in the industry said this will never work. It's too big. You're combining partners from Europe and Asia with law firms in the U.S. The cultural differences will never work, and it's not just largest in numbers, it's just been very successful from a business perspective, revenue-wise. It's a very well-run business, and we've got clients everywhere from early stage startups in different industries all the way up to the top Fortune 100 companies in the world. So it's been a very good success story.
Impressive. So when you did your transition, how were you introduced to this field of law? Did someone inspire you, or you went to workshops, or how did that happen?
I actually read an article in the newspaper.
Okay.
There was an article in the LA Times. I remember, sitting in the lab reading the paper, and there was an article in the LA Times about law firms hiring technical advisors. And so they were hiring PhDs, not necessarily to become lawyers, but they were hiring them. They would call them technical assistants, or they would go and take this patent exam so they could be patent agents, but they weren't necessarily lawyers. And I thought, well, I could do that. This firm happened to be in New York, and it was a very well-known firm at the time, but the idea intrigued me, and I had explored a couple of different options. I had talked with some investors about maybe doing, being an analyst for the industry. But at the time, this is now, I guess, the early 90s, and I know it's hard to think of it this way, but I found there were a lot of sort of 60-year-old men in the industry, and looking at this 20-something-year-old, hotshot PhD saying, this is what I want to do. These men were not really looking at me very favorably going into the investment world. So I had a couple little starts and stops like that. But after I read this newspaper article, I made a couple phone calls. It's funny looking back at it now, because I tended to be more introverted as a scientist, but I was pretty bold. I literally, at the time, there was no Google, so I literally got out the yellow pages. No, I did. I got out the yellow pages. I mean, it's not that long ago, but the internet wasn't in 1991. So I feel so old saying that. No, I literally got out the yellow pages and looked up patent attorneys in San Diego, and I made phone calls and said, here's my story, and what do you think? And the 3 or 4 that I called all said, come and see us. And so I knew I was onto something, that I would be marketable, and I talked to a couple. At the time, there were about 3 or 4 law firms here that specialized in IP for the life sciences industry, and everyone was very favorable and wanted me to come work with them, and said, you probably would want to go to law school, because as a non-lawyer in a law firm, there's only so far you can go. And which is fine for some people, but they knew that someone with a personality to go forward and get a PhD was probably not someone that is going to be content watching their peers, rising above them while they're kind of staying stagnant in a law firm. So if I had gone and taken the patent bar and became a patent agent, I could have had a very good career, but there wouldn't have been that room for advancement within a law firm.
Okay.
So I was, highly encouraged to go to law school, which, I didn't think twice about. And so I took the LSAT, which was just horrible, and then law school was not a good experience either. If you have a science mind, you're very quantitative, and there's a lot of answers, and you get an answer and you go in different directions, but you get answers. And I went to law school, and all they kept saying is, well, there are no answers.
Just
pick a side and take the facts and argue it, and you can go this side or this side, and it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's like, well, how could it not matter? There have to be answers. Guilty or is not guilty, or there's a reason the car went off the road. And it's like, no, you just have to put these facts together and make a story out of it. So my first year of law school was it was a really difficult experience to kind of retrain your brain to start thinking gray instead of black and white.
Right.
Very difficult for me. I don't know if everyone in science who makes that transition has that, but I can imagine it's similar. So once I figured out sort of how to get through law school, then it was easy. But it took me that first year to kind of learn how to play the game. And once I did that, it was fine, but it wasn't the most pleasant experience for me.
And it was about 5 years? 4 or 5 years?
Well, I did a program here locally that actually got me through in 3 years, or a little less, because I didn't take off summers.
Okay.
So there were 3 full semesters, and so you really only need 6 semesters, which would be 3 years taking summers off, but I just went, 1, 2, 3. And then I think I took off the last summer and did an internship. So I went another semester, but it was about 2.5 years, and I was out. And for me, and I know a lot of people that have done this, that have PhDs and then go back to law school, it's really a means to an end. We're not there because we wanted to be lawyers our whole life. It's sort of it was a necessary step to pursue this next career. So like I said, it was a means to an end, and I needed to get the law degree, and that's what the advice I had been given by these other lawyers in town. So I got my degree, and the last year of law school, I ended up doing an internship with the woman who at the time was the patent attorney at the Burnham Institute. And so I worked with her and really started to learn kind of the nuts and bolts of patent law. I mean, I realize now I knew nothing then. But the nice thing is, having the technical background, you come in with a different skill set than the average student who goes from college to law school. That comes out of law school, they don't have any training as a lawyer, and they don't have that fallback, they don't have anything else. I mean, they may have some life experience, but at least going in with the technical background, you can build your legal knowledge on top of that, and so you've got a big head start starting right away. There's a lot of things you can do in the legal field the first couple of years without really understanding the law.
Okay.
So that wasn't a difficult transition, going to work for a law firm, and working as an IP attorney. You really combine scientific findings and inventions with, you know, the sort of legal aspects of patent law. And so it's very, I would say drafting a patent application to me is, it's at least 70% science.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like drafting a manuscript and putting together materials, methods, results, an introduction, and in this case for a patent, you describe sort of what the background of the invention or the science is and why whatever it is new. So it's very much like writing a scientific paper in a sense. So the scientific background made it very easy. So that transition wasn't difficult. And then, you know, I did that for 8 or 9 years, and again, I guess I got a little bored and
Of doing that.
of doing it and needed more challenges, and that's when I looked at these more general practice firms that were doing, you know, corporate work for life science companies and licensing, you know, technologies in and out.
Right.
And, you know, again, I wasn't as interested in litigation, but the business side of the industry intrigued me. And so you don't get that so much in an IP boutique. It's very much patent. So so making the move at that time was, you know, was a good idea for me. You know, I had just become partner, so it was easier to be accepted, you know, in the other law firms. I had some business that I could bring with me, and it was, you know, the best move I could have made in my career. You know, that was 1999, and I'm still really happy and, you know, have grown personally and professionally by making that move.
So what does a partner do? Like, it's different from a patent lawyer, right? It's kind of...
Right, so, yeah, it's interesting. So as an associate, you're learning a lot. You're learning the law, you're learning the business of your clients, you're learning how law firms work. There's a lot of, it's kind of like an apprenticeship in a way. And you've got supervising partners who kind of teach you this all along the way. But at most law firms, to become a partner, you have to show that you can develop business. So you've got to have some ability to go out and interact with people, and that's why, you know, I mentioned earlier I was quite introverted as a scientist, but if you're gonna be successful and want to be a partner in a law firm, you've got to learn to interact with people and sell yourself, sell your firm, let people know that you know what you're talking about. And so it's really important for those, I would say, 8 or 9 years as an associate, you know, to get out in the community, and I would go to meetings, both scientific meetings, but also, you know, on the legal side, different sorts of meetings where there would be executives from companies, you know, decision makers, and so over time, I built a network of people who would ultimately take jobs at companies and whatnot, and I started developing my own business, and that's what a partner needs to do. So as a partner, you need to show that you can keep yourself busy full-time, and hopefully you can keep others busy as well, whether it's other associates or other partners. But over time, you've just got to show that you can build a business. So in a way, you are building your own business within a business. So while we're partners in a law firm, we're also, to a certain extent, we have our own businesses. So that's really important. And if there's a place for people in a law firm that don't develop business. They could be associates for a long time, or we might call them of counsel. Those are typically people who are very good lawyers. They do a good job. There's a need for them, but they're not business developers. And so there's plenty of people like that in the law firm. So there's sort of these different roles that you can take. But I mean, at this point in my career as a partner, I've got a group directly working for me that is about 20 or 22 people. And I always sort of picture it's kind of like the mother bird, you know, and I have to keep my baby birds fed. So I mean, I need to keep them fed with business. This is, you know, they've all got families and jobs, so that they need to provide, you know, for other people. So it's my responsibility to bring in enough business to keep this group busy. At the same time, I still have obligations to stay busy myself. I can't just go out, you know, the lunches and dinners and cocktails and bring in business. it would, make my day a little easier if I could, but I also need to do work. So lawyers have certain hourly requirements. On a yearly basis, you have to bill to clients a certain number of hours, and if you divide it all up, you can figure out pretty much how many hours you need to bill each month and basically each day. So, lawyers are billing, say, from 6 to 10 hours a day, but that's time that you're actually billing. So you may have to be in the office 8 to 12 hours in order to bill those 6 to 10. That's sort of average. So, we've always got that in the back of our minds, So if I'm going to lunches or I'm going to these receptions, which I do a lot, I still have to bill my time, At the end of the day, that's how we're we're billing clients and they're paying the bills and it's a business.
So those hours working on the case.
Exactly.
Working with clients.
Working on all sorts of matters. That time, hopefully you're efficient and you literally keep timesheets and bill all day long, and so in the litigation practice, it's a little bit easier because usually they're working on one case, and so they may have like one entry on their time card. In the patent world, sometimes I may work on as many as 20 cases in a day, but I may only spend half an hour on each one. Just if there's days when just certain things need to be done, maybe a client calls and they want me to look into something, and it may only take a half an hour, so I've got to put that down. And so there's a lot of variety in that, which is one thing I love. For someone who gets bored easily, it's very difficult to get bored when you're working on so many different cases, every day, and so many different technologies. So it's really interesting. But back to your question about being a partner, it's just important to be able to be out there and bring in business to the firm. And it's okay if I can bring in business for other groups, keep other people busy, because at the end of the year, they're going to sort of look and say, well, if you want to get paid this, it has to somehow, make sense with the amount of money you're bringing in the door. So, I can't demand $500,000 in salary if I brought in $500,000 in work, because there's overhead and profit, and then I can get, so we divide it sort of a third and a third and a third. So typically you could get paid 30% of what you bring in the door, because we've got to pay to keep the lights on. I've got to pay the secretaries and the mailroom people. So it's not just as easy as keeping me busy and keeping my associates busy. There's just all that infrastructure that comes with the law firm. So it's it's a business like anything else.
I see. So can you describe a typical day, like in your life, as associates and later as a partner, like how their day is like?
So associates, and it varies a little bit, but I would say like in my group, I encourage the associates to have interactions with the clients. Your days can get very boring if you're just sitting in an office working with your head down and not interacting. So most of the associates have, hundreds of cases that are assigned to them. And then just depending on deadlines, like I said, you may end up picking up, anywhere from 5 to 20 cases in one day. The associates more or less are working on probably 3 to 5 a day, because they're spending a little bit more time on each case and they're not getting client phone calls constantly. But what they'll do is they may have a patent application to draft, or they may be working with the patent office examiners trying to get patents through the patent office, and the patent office will reject. They will reject the patent application claims, and then we go back and forth, and there's this interaction. So they'll be drafting basically the responses back to the patent office. So that's what a lot of their day is the patent application drafting and working with the patent office and the clients to get information. A lot of the back and forth with the patent office requires not only legal arguments but technical arguments. And so a big part of getting these patents is showing why this new invention or new science wasn't obvious over what was already known. And so that takes a certain amount of technical, expertise. So they work with the scientists quite a bit, and that's, most of their day. Usually toward the end of the afternoon, between like 2 and 5, we do a lot of the filings with the patent office. So, it's getting documents together for the assistants and getting all that done. But that's, typically for an associate what their day looks like. My day's a little bit more hectic because my phone is typically ringing off the hook in between doing the work. And so
you have to pick them up.
You have to. And at this point, I haven't looked last, but I've probably got over 100 clients. And so if you can imagine on any given day, if 5 of them call, and more are calling, but and most of them, will say, I just have a quick question. But if you can imagine that happening like every 20 minutes, somebody saying, I have a quick question, I have a quick question. And it's great, but that's just more of my life. It's a little bit, it's like being in an emergency room, I think. You're multitasking, you're doing 100 things at once.
I can kind of feel it because every time I write you email, immediately response come back. It's like online chatting instead of email.
It is. So I spend a lot of time in the office, but and there's a lot of conference calls that are set up in advance. So I've got those scheduled, so I know what my day is going to look like. But, again, in between, I get the random calls. I'm always at the computer. If I'm not in the office, I'm on my BlackBerry or my iPhone. I have both. Right. It's a little, obsessive. But part of the reason for that, and I've learned this over the years, is clients will stay with you as long as you provide good service. And it's kind of hard to believe, but the quality of the work to a certain extent comes second. But if you're not responsive, and if you don't treat them like they're your only client, they will go to another law firm. And so I am very responsive, and it's almost a joke with some of my clients. They're like, no matter where you are in the world, you just respond. It's like, do you sleep? So, and I've gotten emails before when, sometimes I might wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and I'll check my email and I'll respond to someone, and then they'll say, wait, where are you? Are you in Europe? And I'm like, no, I'm in San Diego. And so, okay, this might be a little obsessive, but the point is they really will focus on how responsive you are. And it's okay if I say, I need to take a look at that. Can I get back to you tomorrow? But getting that response. So I've tried to impress upon my associates how important it is to respond. You don't have to have the answer right then, but just respond. Let them know they're loved. Let them know that they are the only ones that you are thinking about at that time. And never, ever, ever say, I can't get that till tomorrow because I'm working on another client or something like that. You never say that.
Terrible.
Yeah, it's kind of like you don't want to be dating someone and then have them say, well, I can't go out with you tonight because I'm going out with Cheryl. You can't do that. I'm not going to go out with you again. So it's the same thing. You can't tell a client that you're working on another client. So you just say, got your message. I need to take another look at that. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Is that okay? So that's a really important part of what we do. And there's a lot of juggling. But, and of course you guys know, nowadays with technology, everyone expects something instantly. I'll see an email, and I've got some clients, and if I don't respond like in 5 minutes, they'll call. It's like, why didn't you answer my email?
It's to prevent that phone call, you just write it.
I think that is part of it, but nowadays, and it's not just in what I do, everyone expects the instant answer, and I'm supposed to know right away. And a lot of times when I'm sitting at my desk and I'm on conference calls, I'm Googling stuff to try and, if it's like a new client and they're explaining their technology to me, sometimes I will sit at the computer and Google something so that I can
understand it better.
Yeah, if they haven't given me, advance notice of what it is. and that's always fun. I couldn't do that 20 years ago. I had to really study. But now, you can Google just about anything and go, oh yes, well, yeah, I remember when, come up with something, and they're pretty impressed. But yeah, so I mean, that's my typical day. And then I always mix in, I may take a client to lunch, or get out in the evening. There might be a reception, or some sort of panel discussion, something like this or whatever. A lot of times those are breakfast meetings or dinner meetings or something. So, you do try and fit those in, but again, that helps with developing business ultimately. If people see you and get to know you, you build those relationships over time. So it's really important.
I see.
And I always tell my associates, you're not going to build relationships sitting in the office. I mean, the clients do not come knocking on your door typically. So,
so how much technology, like the science part, occupies your daily life?
It's a good part of it. It's probably less nowadays because I handle more complex legal issues for clients. I do get involved if they're in litigation and trying to help them settle things. So there's the legal aspect, but there's always the science part to it. I'm working with a client right now who, it's a large pharmaceutical company, and their clinical trial failed. And they had licensed the initial drug from a small company. And so as part of winding down the program, because clinical trials failed, we're terminating the license agreement because we obviously don't need the technology anymore, and they sued us. And there's, other parts to this, but it was really important to bring me in to understand not just the science, but to understand, and you guys might know this, but when a clinical trial fails, that's not the end. There's still patients who were positively, reacting to the drug. Just because statistically the drug didn't work doesn't mean there weren't certain patients for which it worked. And so after a clinical trial fails, a physician can choose to request additional drug for that patient, and under the FDA guidelines, that's permitted. Because if it got that far, it's already past the safety issues. So there wasn't a safety issue necessarily. It's just
effectiveness,
compared to the placebo, the drug just may not have worked. The effectiveness. And so, for example, in this particular case, we've got to have the option of being able to manufacture more drug for the next 7 years, in case any of these physicians are requesting drug for some of their patients that were responders. And so that's an issue, my colleagues who are litigators wouldn't have known that. And in working with the client, I'm doing this settlement agreement between the parties, but I have to build in there that my client's got certain regulatory obligations that requires them to keep parts of that license. They can't just give back the whole thing. They've got to be able to manufacture new drug if they have to, and they need a license just so there's specific uses that they need a license for. But so, am I using my science there? Yes, and of course I can understand the issues a little bit better than my colleagues, but that's not certainly something I learned in the lab. I just learned it over the years from understanding the business of my clients and sort of how the entire process works from day one in the lab, research and development and getting a drug into clinical trials and ultimately to the market. So I've learned, there's a lot of issues all along the way. And I don't necessarily specialize in one area. Along that way, I try to understand the whole pathway from, phase preclinical to phase 1 to the market. So yeah, there's always a science piece to it.
I guess the PhD training really gives a good, you basically understand everything. Or you try to understand everything.
But you know what else? You not only understand the substance, but I think you have a better understanding of how to approach a problem and how to look at data and how to look at information in a different way than, as I said, maybe someone who has a bachelor's in biology. You have a different way of thinking. You're forced to think differently when you go through the PhD program. you've got to become independent at some point and analyze information. And it's a huge value add, I think, for our clients when you can bring that to the table and not something that maybe the average biology major brings.
I see.
So.
Okay.
Another question. What is your most difficult time in your career? Except for the law school thing.
Yeah, which the most difficult. That's a good question. It might have been the time leading up to becoming a partner. That's very stressful. It's certainly.
Is it like a tenure track? Like compared
Yeah, to a certain extent.
Okay.
It's very difficult to get rid of a partner. Yeah, so I guess that's a good analogy to a certain extent, and it's whether you're a professor or an associate or lawyer, it's sort of that point that you're striving for all along. There's other points after that, but certainly that's the key point that you're striving for, and so there's a lot of pressure. It's probably worse today because it's more competitive. There's many more associates, and so again, having something that sets you apart from everyone else, so having a PhD, or we've got certain associates who are out in business for 5 years or something before going to law school. They bring something to the table that someone who's 21 and just graduated college and went straight to law school brings to the table. So I knew that I had an advantage to a certain extent, but you still need to prove yourself, and that's hard. Having gone through the PhD program and everything, you feel like, I did it, and I've got the PhD, and now you're proving yourself all over again. So I found it very, very difficult, and unfortunately, I was also at the time in a firm that wasn't as receptive to women in the field, and so it's hard to believe, but it really was difficult. There was one other woman attorney, and our office here was fairly small, but it was difficult, and I found I had gotten married and I wanted to start a family, and I was so conscious of my timing of being up for partner and when I could get married and when I could have a baby, and you shouldn't have to deal with all that. I mean, planning is one thing, but this was more, is this going to hold me back from the career I'm trying to, achieve? And nowadays, I mean, almost every business, not just law firms, but almost every business, has more flexible plans for men and women trying to start families and whatnot. But back then it was, agonizing, trying to figure all this out and timing things, and could I plan to have a baby during the summer because it was a little quieter? I drove myself crazy with the pressure of becoming partner and trying to start a family. So that was a really very difficult time, and in fact, and I don't tell a lot of people this, but when I became pregnant, I hid it for a very long time because I was worried about what was going to happen, and were they going to see me the same and on the same path? And at the time, I was about a 5th year associate, and at that firm, around 7 years, you could come up for partner, and I didn't want people to think that I was delaying things, and so I did a very good job of hiding it for a very long time.
Until like 5th month?
7th.
Oh god.
Yes, I don't advise it. That probably added more stress to my life, but thankfully I was tall and I didn't gain a lot of weight. And literally, I mean, it was the 7th month, and I told everyone, and usually people tell it at the 3rd month. And so they're all calculating when you're going to be out. And so, of course, I'm going around, I'm pregnant and going on maternity leave. And they're like, oh, when? And I'm like, oh, in 2 months. So, in hindsight, perhaps I should have rethought that a little bit because people were shocked. Because by the time I told them, I mean, I looked like maybe I had had a big dinner or something. But, yeah, so it was a really difficult time in my life trying to balance everything, and it all worked out.
Nice.
Yeah.
I guess that's the answer for my next question. When is your happiest time?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was certainly a lot of stress at that time, but yeah, obviously, I have a daughter who's actually now applying to college, so this is her last year in high school. But yeah, that's been wonderful. It's been a juggle, but you know, having a career and you know, having a daughter, and I've been a single mom for 8 years, so it's been quite a juggle, but it's wonderful. So you can actually do it all. You can if you know are organized and plan and you're with the right company. You can do it.
I see. So how do you know that law actually is a good fit for you?
Well, I mean, first of all, I was going to say, it better be. I didn't know. I really didn't know. And like I said, I never grew up thinking I wanted to be a lawyer. We had no lawyers in my family. So I don't come from a family where that was ever discussed. Most of the people in my family are on the science side, either engineers, doctors. So I didn't really know lawyers growing up and had no idea. So it was really just sort of the survey that I had taken, you know, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the science background.
Assessment?
When I was just talking to these different lawyers in town, and the ones I talked to had PhDs, so they understood, you know, the path I wanted. But it wasn't until then that I decided it made sense. And I've never second guessed it. There's never been a time where I didn't completely enjoy what I'm doing. I mean, I'm really fortunate because I know everyone's got friends who complain about
they don't like what they're
their
doing.
work or their major or whatever they're doing. So I'm really fortunate. I mean, I love what I do, and you know, I can't imagine doing anything else. So it turned out to be a good fit. But for me, I'm still a scientist, and I look at it as like I specialize in the law, and I'm not a lawyer that happens to have a science background. That's not how I look at myself. I still see myself as, you know, because I'm so, you know, I read science and nature, and I'm still, you know, into all the science, and I bring the law into that. So rather than the other way around. So I think maybe it's a little bit different approach, but I know in the people that I work with and the scientists that I work with, they appreciate that because I can sit and have the scientific conversations, and then I can, you know, put the law on top of that. So yeah, it's been wonderful. I mean, I've had good fortune, and you know, I've worked with 5 or 6 Nobel Prize winners. I mean, I've worked with Roger Chen here at UCSD. He was one of my clients, and hopefully some future Nobel Prize winners. But I've had that opportunity where, you know, I might not have, you know, Edelman at Scripps, and just some amazing, you know, Nobel Prize winners. And, you know, if I was in science, you know, these people wouldn't have given me the time of day. So, but having the science background and being able to communicate, you know, with these people, I think has made a big difference. So.
Wow. So what, if looking backwards, what kind of personality you think is crucial there about you that is make you very fortunate about your career choice of law?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I think I had a more traditional scientist personality, and maybe I still do, and I forced the other part of it. But I mean, because I was painfully shy growing up through high school. I really was. I was very focused on the science. I was almost like borderline nerd. I really was.
I didn't mention that.
No, I really was, because I was so into, you know, school and science, and I was very shy. And I don't think you can be a successful lawyer and be shy. Or at least you can't appear shy. You've got to appear confident and
outgoing.
You really do. And I mean, I still find myself very uncomfortable in situations where, like, if I go to a reception and I don't really know people, I'm very uncomfortable. I'm not that person who can just walk up and strike up a conversation.
Social butterflies.
Yeah, I'm still very uncomfortable, and I see some of my colleagues who are more of the just, I don't know if I should say this, but typical, stereotypical lawyer, just seem more comfortable talking and talking about themselves and whatnot. And that still isn't a part of me that I'm comfortable with, but I do think you have to at least, and I tell my associates this, you have to give this appearance of confidence, whether you're comfortable with that or not. You have to appear confident. You have to not be shy about letting people know what you know. Especially if I'm being interviewed to be a new attorney for a company, I've got to be outspoken about my background and my experience in a certain area. I can't. You can't necessarily be completely humble in that situation. You've got to say, there was a new molecular diagnostic company that came to me a couple of weeks ago, and they're like, well, what do you know about this? And, and I can say, hey, I've done patent work for Bert Vogelstein at Johns Hopkins, and, P53 mutations, and I've done, I can come up with 10 pretty interesting things that I've done that people would have heard of in the industry, and you can't be shy about that. You've got to sort of lay it out there. So I think that's part of the personality that I've learned. It's not natural, but I've learned it.
So you find it's possible to develop that side?
Evidently, yeah. It is. I think people that knew me as a scientist that haven't seen me would be surprised.
Right.
I was very quiet.
So it's good news for all scientists, I think.
The only thing I was always very, very comfortable with was public speaking. I always, and I think both my parents have PhDs in different disciplines, but one thing they taught me, again, I think it's the confidence thing, is that, standing up in front of people, you're more well prepared than anyone sitting out there. You know more about that topic on that day at that time than anybody sitting in that audience. I don't care who it is, because you prepared. And so I always am comfortable with that, knowing, obviously those first couple minutes, when you start talking, you're nervous and there's people looking at you. And,
after a couple of times, you're more comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And but again, if you always keep that in your mind, that you deserve to be there. That for whatever reason that you're giving a presentation or whatnot, or if I'm sitting in a meeting, there's a reason I'm there. And about that topic, and so you need to just learn to be comfortable with that. So yeah, I think you can easily come from being a bench scientist to doing almost anything. Your cells are really interesting in the dish as you're feeding them, but they don't give you a lot of feedback. You need to learn to interact with other people.
Right.
I think it's important, even if you stay in the lab for your whole life. I think it's really important. Just especially in today's world, I think, because people rely a little bit too much on, sending a text or an email and not picking up the phone and talking, or not
Direct
interacting. I think that's just really important. And I see it, with not just this generation, but, like with my teenagers, it's just, I think it's terrible the way they rely so much on what I call non-communication. It's just,
texting all the time.
they just rarely, and even with my associates who are, they're in their 30s, it's like, pick up the phone, stop. Or in my situation, they're 2 offices down. Stop sending me emails.
Just come and see.
It's driving me crazy. It's okay to send a quick email on something and I'll reply, but I'm not going to have a whole conversation. Just come here for 2 seconds. So that's really important, no matter what you end up doing, is to build the interpersonal skills, even if you want to sit at the bench. I think it's really important.
So coming to the event is important, rather than sitting at the computer.
It is. I think it is really important to get out, force yourself to do things that you're uncomfortable with. I think that's something, I tell people that all the time. It's the only way you're going to learn.
Get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. You don't have to, jump out of an airplane. That's extreme, but do some things that you might not, like I still do force myself sometimes to go to these events or receptions where I know I'm probably not going to know a lot of people, but I think there may be some benefit to me being there.
Maybe some
And
surprises.
I kind of force myself. I'll look at my watch and I'll say, "You've got to stay for 30 minutes," because it's so comfortable.
Right.
It's just but the more you do it, it gets a little better. So I just think that's important, no matter what you do.
Nice.
What is your favorite part about your job?
My favorite part.
Enjoy most?
I enjoy the people that I work with, not just at the firm, but the clients. I mean, like I said, I get to interact with these people, and the very nature of my work, patents means that they're working on something new that nobody else has ever done before. So just by definition, I'm dealing with people that come up with, amazing new technologies or, I work with Craig Venter at the Synthetic Genomics, he sequenced the human genome. It's like, no, I mean, people like that I actually am doing work for.
And you're providing value to them.
I am providing value, yes. Of course. That's why they keep me on. No, I am. And I'm learning from them, and they're learning from me, and we're developing, new businesses, and it's really, it's exciting every day to me. I think the other part that I really love, again, I guess it goes back to this being in the lab and, you're very narrowly focused, and it doesn't mean that's a bad thing, but, I remember when I was in graduate school and I got to meet Sabin, the polio vaccine, and he said, what question are you asking? And I started to say, well, I'm working on, he goes, no, what question are you asking? And so he kind of really put that in perspective, and I always think about that because sometimes when you are a bench scientist, you are asking one question, and you're very narrowly focused. And so I get to go to work every day, and I get to work on new stem cell technologies, from 9 to 10, and then I get to work on this new cancer diagnostic from 10 to 11, and then I'm working with a company that's figured out a way to identify which drug you should be on. It's personalized medicine, but which drug for your cancer. But not only that, what time frame you're going to become resistant to that drug, so they can put you on a second drug before you become resistant.
Oh, you take care of that too?
Yeah, so I'm doing stem cells, cancer diagnostics, personalized medicine, a little bit of plant biology, but there's so many different technologies and really interesting things going on every single day. There's no way you can get bored. There's no way. And I live vicariously now through a lot of my clients. I see press releases and I see them on, the cover of Time magazine or something, and I'm like, I did work for them. It's like
all of these problems.
It's really, so you can live vicariously through them and get that excitement. But I think that's the scientist in me, I do get very excited by what, where the field is going. And it's neat to be a little part of it.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Impressive. I think that it's very good news for the scientists.
Yeah.
Like everybody.
And there's a lot of more options today, I think. Besides just going into law, I think a lot of scientists do go straight into the business side. So, they may be doing business development with a company, trying to go out there and help do the deals between maybe a smaller company and a large pharma company. And understanding the science obviously helps you in knowing how to do that, how to structure a deal. If it's for a new drug or a new diagnostic or whatnot, understanding the science is really critical. So there's a lot of new positions, I think, that people with science backgrounds can go into. I think it was a little bit more limited, when I was doing it, but there's a lot of opportunities. So just whatever it is that you end up doing, just make sure, that you love it and you're passionate about it, because, it would just be dreadful to have to work, this hard.
I don't like it.
And sort of go through the motions. And we all know people like that, but if you love the science, there's so much that you can do and enjoy.
Nice. So if looking back of the time, if we can turn back time, right?
Okay.
If you're gonna go through it all over again, what would you do differently? Or you would do exactly the same?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. There was a time in medical school when I thought about going forward and becoming a doctor. So I do wonder about that sometimes, but I don't regret it. I just
Curious about it.
I'm so fascinated with medicine. So I wonder about that sometimes. That's probably the only thing. Other than that, I think the choices I made have made sense. Doing the PhD and then the postdoc made sense for me, and it got me to California. I'm originally from the East Coast, so I'm originally from New York, and then I grew up in the DC area. But if I hadn't have gone that route, I might not have come out to San Diego, and if I hadn't have come to San Diego, which is now one of the top biotech and pharma,
Base.
geographical locations, not only in the country, but in the world, I would have had a whole different career if I'd stayed in DC, for example. I mean, I might be at the FDA. With all due respect to at the FDA, but that might have happened. But I think the opportunities would have been completely different. So I'm not sure if I would have changed anything. I love that I went to an IP boutique and really learned everything I could about the patent world and patent law, and I really came out of there strong. And that was almost 9 years of just doing patent work. And so taking that and then moving into the broader field, I think that was smart for me. I see some of these kids that are trying to do patent law and corporate law and licensing law and whatever, and I'm not sure if they're ever going to get a deep grasp of each one of those, which may be fine. But for me, really coming out with that strong patent background, I think has been something I could build on, and it's been helpful.
I see.
So I don't really regret anything.
That's great. So in various stage of your life, do you always have good mentors working with you, taking care of you?
Yeah, always. And that's really important. And just because you're a woman doesn't mean you need a female mentor. It's important, but I've had some amazing male mentors throughout my career, and I still do. As I've moved up, and we didn't really talk about this, but within the firm, so I also co-chair our global life science group with a partner on the East Coast and then another partner in London, and the three of us kind of run the life science group for the firm worldwide. I rely on them very heavily, and they rely on me, so they're my mentors as well. One of them does more general corporate litigation, and so I learn a lot from him, but he works for a lot of the large pharma companies too, which traditionally I hadn't done. So he's a mentor, and the woman in London, to a certain extent, is a mentor as well. So I've got some that people would maybe consider my equals that are mentors to me. And then moving along, as I said, when you become partner, that's sort of a certain pinnacle, but there's other things. And in the last 2 years, I was asked to serve on our firm's executive board. And so that's a group of, right now, I think 22 lawyers. And this is for the US, so we've got like 1,400 lawyers, and there's 22 that basically are the executive board for the firm. There's 4 women on that board. So it was really, an honor to do that, but it was also, one of those things where it's like, how did I get here? I don't know what I'm doing. But obviously, again, I think we all think that at some point. And so I rely heavily on some of those other women on that board as mentors. They were there before me, most of them except for one. So I rely on them, so I've sort of found those mentors. But there's a couple of men on that board too that have sort of taken me under their wing. But I think it's really critical throughout every stage of your career, no matter what you do, to find mentors, to find sort of champions, people that will help be your supporters and your sponsors, sort of, to push you along, because, it's critical. In any business or in any profession, you've got to have that. I don't think you can succeed without those champions behind you.
Right.
So you have to prove yourself, but it's probably, in my mind, it's a little less of a formal process and a little bit more informal, but I have found that all along the way. And I, in turn, try and mentor not only my associates, I mentor some of the associates in other groups, like even, especially in our office, some of the other women I've tried to help mentor in the corporate group because there's not as many corporate women partners. So I've tried to mentor some of them and outside of the firm as well. You know, I have my law school professor calls all the time asking if I'll talk to somebody, you know, have one of those, what do you want to do when you grow up talks. But I'm happy to do it. So I do that quite a bit too. So yeah, it's important.
Great.
Then now we come to the last question. So now the young grad students are here, they're wondering, you know, they're in the crossroad of their life. Maybe one day they'll decide which path to take. So what kind of personality or what kind of person that you would recommend the path of law? And rather, on the other hand, which kind of person you would not recommend at all?
You know, I mean, it's a little bit hard to say. Anyone who's a graduate student, again, you know, you've got a certain drive that is different from someone maybe who is not on the same path. And that's not to say that people that don't go to graduate school don't have drive, because there's so many careers where you go straight from college into amazing careers. But in the sciences in particular, I just see a certain personality of people that are driven and very interested in figuring out things. And to a certain extent, the law is like that. You know, you're a problem solver. And so I think anyone who enjoys problem solving would enjoy it. You know, again, it's a different way of thinking to a certain extent. And in the actual practice, not in law school, but in the actual practice, you don't get to decide which side you're on. You know, you're representing your client, and they're in a certain situation. And so you've got to be a flexible person. You can't be rigid. You obviously can't look at your client, you know, that's being sued for something and say, well, yeah, you know, I kind of agree with those guys. And so, you know, again, so maybe being a problem solver, being flexible, you need to definitely be a team player. On every team, there's got to be a leader for sure, but there's certain instances where you don't get to be the leader. And so it's really important to learn to be a good team player. I think that's probably one of the more important attributes I look at my associates is, you know, do they play well with others? Do they get along with others? Do they, you know, do they get along well with the clients? That's part of being a team player. And, you know, as I said, not always being the leader and sometimes taking a more subordinate role. I mean, even at this point in my career, there's plenty of teams, client teams that I'm on where I'm a member of the team and I don't call the shots and I'm asked to do certain things. I'm certainly asked for input, but I'm not the team leader. And so I think if you're someone who's more aggressive and sort of bossy and controlling, it may not be the best environment for you. So I think that's important. And again, some of these things aren't any different than a lot of professions. You know, if you go to work for a company and you're a management or something, you obviously need to be part of a team. And it's critical. But yeah, something to think about. And are you someone that can sort of come out of your shell and contribute? Because you have to think about, well, why would they want me on the team if I'm just going to sit there? You know, I mean, I've got a certain
initiative, kind of.
Yeah. You've got to be maybe a little bit more proactive than the typical scientist.
I see.
But you know, again, whatever it is whichever direction you go, you know, just find something you love and you know, find your sort of niche.
Nice. And talk to people.
Yeah, talk to people. I think it's really important. Talk to people about their jobs. Talk to people, like this. Find out what's it like to, I don't know, be CEO of a biotech company.
Right.
Maybe you want to go get an MBA at San Diego State. I don't know. Maybe they don't have the program anymore. But at USD, didn't they combine it with some? I think they combined like a law, MBA, whatever. But maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe law school's not the right thing, but maybe you do want to get a business degree. Maybe you just want to go into business and not get another degree. So there's so many different options, but I would definitely recommend, if you're sure that this is an industry you want to be a part of, looking at different types of jobs and positions. And I've had associates leave our firm and go. I've got one that's business development over at Biosite, which is a stem cell company, and she's doing a great job. She does a lot of partnering and license agreements, but she was a patent attorney by training. So there's just a lot of different things you can do.
Good. Wow. I learned a lot. I hope you all learned a lot too. So now we're open to the Q&A session. So anyone has a particular question that you want to ask? Yes.
So when I first heard that you got a PhD and then you went to law school, my initial impulse was, oh my God, how could you be in school forever? Like a fear of being a student forever,
Right.
Like never having a real job, especially since I want to have a family one day. So do you think that it was like worth it, and like necessarily like the PhD in that as well? Like, did you also have a moment where you were like, I'm a student forever?
No, I never really thought like that, because I did the more traditional path where I got the PhD. And that was actually pretty quick. It was in just under 5 years, so it wasn't, like 7 years or something. So I did that in under 5, and then I came out here to do my postdoc, and so I was on the traditional path. And I didn't know what I was going to do after that. It didn't occur to me, but I stayed in the postdoc for 3 years. So in my mind, I wasn't a student at that time. I was working and getting a paycheck, and I was a lab scientist. But when I found that this law school had this accelerated program that I could go through, it was literally, I think it was like 2 years and 4 months. And I just, got it done. So I didn't feel like I was in school forever. It's, it's a huge commitment, but I have associates who work in the law firm. I guess they're not truly associates, but they go to law school at night. It's something you can do. I wouldn't advise it if you're trying to start a family. I just don't even know when you do that. But you can do that if you want. So you would be working and then go to school at night. And I know people that do that, but that takes 4 years. So there's always these trade-offs. But no, I guess I was thinking long-term. And at the time, I think it was easy for me to put off serious relationships because I was so focused on my career, and I was really driven, and so, maybe that's an advantage that I made these decisions when I was in my 20s still, so I could do it before it got to be too late. But if it's something you want to do, you'll figure out a way. Don't worry what anyone else says. I know when people look at my resume, they're like, "Oh, you just didn't want to work." No, that's not exactly. Yeah, I'm really lazy. But don't worry what anyone else says. And if you are married or whatever, you do need to have a supportive spouse. I will say that. Because the last thing you need is somebody giving you a hard time about that sort of decision. So it is time consuming.
Okay, there's a
Kind
question.
of along the same lines, was graduating from law school, was that a condition of your first position as a patent attorney, or did you take that position?
No, because what I did was, I'm trying to think, I clerked with a law firm during my first 2 years of law school. I guess the job I ultimately took was based on the fact that I was graduating law school and taking the bar exam. But, at the end of the day, if for some reason I flunked the bar exam, which I was convinced that I had, but I didn't. They would have probably kept me on as a patent agent. You take this exam that lets you be a patent agent and you essentially do the same kind of work. So I could have done that, but you know, if you make the commitment to go to law school, I wouldn't worry, you know,
So
you'll
it's-
be
So
fine.
starting as like a patent attorney and then going back to law school, you're just kind of prolonging the school until.
To a certain extent, the funny thing is, when I look at resumes now, I actually probably don't like the resumes as much where people have gone straight from a PhD to law school and not done a postdoc, because then it does look like to me that all they were doing is going to a lot of school. Even though, I mean, we all know getting your PhD is not like being in school. It's like working. It is working. So, but still, I prefer having kind of that real world experience as a postdoc for a couple of years. I think that's important. And unless you know, like really early on, that you're absolutely not going to be a bench scientist, and I think there's not a lot of people that know that 100%. I mean, I would do at least like do a year postdoc or something like that before kind of making that decision, because it's obviously a huge commitment. And you may not enjoy law school.
It might be a killer.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
So you say like you've been able to balance being a partner, having a daughter, and everything. How much do you sleep?
That's a really good question.
I like that question too.
I
How many hours?
I try to get 6 or 7 hours of sleep a night. It's not restful sleep. I will admit, I'm up constantly. I mean, at this point, I think the associates sleep a lot better than I do. But I've got a very international practice now, so I've got emails and clients in Europe and in Asia. And so that kind of covers the 24/7. So there, you know, again, it's a lot of juggling. There are a lot of conference calls. Thank God they're not video conferences at like 5 a.m. And so, you know, you may need to be prepared for that. And then there's just as many, like with Asia in the evening. So yeah, you change your lifestyle. And I do tell my associates that it's not a job, it is kind of a lifestyle, and you have to be committed to it. But, you know, like I said, there are career paths where you don't have to do that. You can be, you know, an associate for a long time and then sort of go off of the partner track and be an important member of the law firm without doing the partner track and taking on, I guess, the additional stress. But it works out.
Nice.
Okay, I guess it's this. We have to wrap up here. Thank you very much, Lisa. It's very great
Yeah, thank
to
you.
have you here today.
Sure.
Thanks for coming, and thank everybody for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
So maybe, hopefully, you all have good choices in the future, and so hope to see you at our next event. Thank you.
Thank you.